Because I was not prepared to talk about kindness in this manner. Let me start by saying all protocol observed. I'm sure when we started, the program director and the family observed the protocol and honored everyone. So I'm not going to go there. We are here to bid farewell to one of our colleagues, a friend, a partner. Last year, on his birthday, we were at his house. He called all of us there, and when we arrived, suddenly I found myself making a speech, unplanned, because he just decided, who was kind? We are here talking about the product of our struggles. For you to understand Kaya, you need to understand Port Elizabeth, Quebec, and its struggles. Following the 1976 riots and the banning of the student organizations, newspapers in 1977, the enemy thought it had succeeded to do what it did in the 1960s after the banning of the ANC. They thought they had crushed everything. But little did they know that this time round, there are lessons that were learned from the previous bannings. The second thing the enemy did, and a terrible mistake, was to round off the few activists that remained from Port Elizabeth, from Bloemfontein, from Soweto, and so on. They rounded them off and took them to Madiba prison in Johannesburg. And while they were there, one of the things they discussed was to establish student leagues. And as they got released in PE, they established the Port Elizabeth Student League, Bloemfontein Student League, Soweto Student League, and so on. But the ANC had a bigger vision for them. Joe Comrade, who was the leader of the ANC, and the team he worked with, that included MASOTSHA, and others, convened all those leagues. And in Port Elizabeth, I'm sure you remember Simpium Timkulu, Zenzile Wantu, and others, attended that launching congress of COSAS. And Port Elizabeth became one of our launching pads to build a strong student movement. Now I want to show you where Kaya fits into this picture. From its infant stages, by 1980, the first president of COSAS, Ephraim Mukhala, was arrested and sentenced to 5 years on Robben Island for furthering the aims of the ANC. The deputy president of COSAS took over to lead COSAS Zenzile from Port Elizabeth, which I did not stay longer than a year too. He had to leave the country. And the third president of COSAS from Port Elizabeth again, Shepherd Mati, took over. Now, it was under the leadership of Shepherd Madi that COSAS was built to be a very formidable movement. But what is it that made young people like Kaya to be attracted to COSAS at the time? Apart from the demands that COSAS was putting forward, is what the enemy did to Simpion Timkulu and Simanak. Simpion Timkulu was captured by the enemy, they poisoned him, and they released him. And as they released him, his hair was falling. While we were still looking at that, both Simpion and Simanak were kidnapped, and we never saw them. The only thing Simpion's mother had was a bunch of his hair which he removed as it was falling apart. And that is the pain most activists of PE, young and old, had. Kaya's father realized that as they told you as a policeman, he did not want Kaya initially to be involved in these things. But every time Kaya came back on holidays, he linked with his comrades. And ultimately went back to finish his studies in Port Elizabeth. And that year, it was a year that COSAS had declared the year of SRCs. When we had said we demand SRCs in each and every school. And Kaya is one of those young activists who led that. But also in Port Elizabeth, then we had what we call Amabutu. Because the enemy was beginning to attack student leaders, attack progressive leaders. Kaya and others formed themselves into Amabutu as a bar. They would move from one street to another. As the enemy is chasing us, they were chasing it back. They had committed themselves to the struggle for freedom. And naturally, the enemy identified those it defined as Amabutu, and it wanted to deal with them. And it was also during the time when President Oliver Tambo made a call to all of us to say, do South Africa ungovernable and make apartheid unworkable. Now, when that message reached the young lions of COSAS, we could take that message practically. By then, the president was Lulu Johnson, also from Port Elizabeth. In fact, if I were to explain to you, from 1979 to 85, when COSAS was banned, except President If Mukhali, who had been President Robert Allen, the next three presidents of COSAS came from Port Elizabeth. They were leaders who worked with Kaya. That is why even when I was talking to Lulu Johnson and Shepherd Madi about Kaya, they were very worried. Because the last time Lulu came to Cape Town, we went to see Kaya with him. And he kept on asking, when are you going back to PE? The situation is bad, the organization is falling apart. And all what Kaya could say was that, hey, Mikulo, even here in Cape Town, if there's something that pained Kaya most is the current state of the ANC. Because the ANC is not what it ought to be. And comrades like Kaya, who sacrificed their childhood, were more worried than anybody else. By 1986, when the police harassment intensified, Kaya had no option but to leave the country. Now, as he leaves the country, he was 17 years old, about to turn 18 years old. Very young. But he was already clear at the time that sizobashiya abazali emakhaya siye kwamanye amazwe. Obviously the parents were worried, because between me and you now, if we look at our 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds, we feel that it is not fair to let them get involved in things that we at the time were involved in. He left, he turned 18 while he was in exile. On his arrival, because he was young, the first question he was asked was, did you complete your studies? Do you want to study? Naturally, like all young people, the first choice is the military. But the leadership took him to Tanzania first to say, no, you will go to the military, but you must first start at school. And he landed up at Somafco. Arriving in Somafco, now he arrives at a different school, different environment. But the first thing he said, but in South Africa we're fighting for democratically elected SRC. Manje lapha, yes, I agree, is the leadership of the movement that is running the school, but where is the student representation? We must have an SRC. I will feel you say in your Somafco. The mentality indeed, the student leadership was elected, and he was one of those student leaders at Somafco. And I think Kaya's passion for education and his love for reading began there. His love for poetry. Because every time there were cultural evenings in Somafco, Kaya would be one of those who would go to the stage and do a poem. And he started writing poems there. I'm not sure whether he showed you, Mama, his book of poetry. There are poems he used to write. And he used to be proud. In fact, with Kaya, when you see him, he will first boast for you to say, you see, I'm a poet. After 3 days, you see, I'm a diplomat. And indeed, he was all of those things. He was a poet, he was a diplomat, he was a writer. Sometimes we will see he will be drafting a document. Or I will write a document, I will give him, he will edit it. Or if he has written it, I will do the editing. But when we are done, he will then say, no, I think I must write this document as a diplomat now. Because initially he will use one language, but along the way he will realize that maybe his language is coming too forceful. Then he will tone it down. On his return from exile in 1990, I was then working for what was called the South African Student Education Trust, SASET, and the South African Prisoners Education Trust. One of the things we were doing was to give bursaries to ex-political prisoners, and immediately we instructed the returning exiles desks, which we started to lead. And Kaya is one of those that we had to go and negotiate with Jake Scarver to let him be admitted. And we arranged the bursary for him with a number of other comrades he was with. One thing with Kaya, it was the seriousness about his books. Now, you know, most of these comrades who came from exile and prison, we were giving them and we give them his year allowance for food, and they will survive for a year. Hey, Maguya Mokala Manji, you give them an allowance for a year, in a month is finished. The following day, I say, it's not what guys, but because indeed some of them did not understand money properly. There are those who understood money, but there are those who money means nothing. I remember one guy, when he has money, he will give everybody money even if he doesn't know it. So we then decided that let them collect monthly rations. Every month they must come to our offices where stop. So every month they come, they'll take a train, come to the office, we'll give them their allowances. And when I'm on campus with them, they'll be starting to complain to say, you see, we suspect it's you. You want to manage us. You are managing our money. And I said, no, but if we give you the money, you can't manage yourself. He's one of the few who completed his studies. Because some of the comrades came back, they stayed on campus, 3 years, they left, no qualification. But Kaya did not only communicate, as Zeka was saying, the magistrate. When he completed at UWC, he went to Stellenbosch to study international relations. From there, he went to work in various fields international. But I want to talk about the period he worked in Parliament. Those who are working in Parliament would know when Kaya arrived in Parliament, is the period when the Secretary of Parliament, Dennis Ngile, was dismissed, and the new secretary came and there were tensions. Now Kaya had to supervise some of the people there. And you know, in this environment, sometimes political principals will be coming to say, dismiss that one, dismiss that one. And unfortunately, some of the comrades had to be dismissed. 3 years ago, Kaya came to me to say, I want us to go to Bloemfontein because there is a person I must go and apologize to. Because he was a good man. I was just forced to dismiss him because he was associated with somebody else. That was Kaya's plea. That is why even at work, Kaya always fought for those he feels they are being abused. He hated people who use their power and authority to abuse other people. And he would talk about it. Even if he doesn't know a person, he had never seen a person. He will listen, he had a good ear to listen. And when he understands a person's story and takes that person's fight, he takes that fight passionately. That is the Kaya I know. As I said, as a cadre of the movement, loyal and disciplined, he was gravely concerned about the state of organization. He was gravely concerned about the leadership, particularly where you find the leadership speaking in folk tongues. And from time to time, he would come to me and say, hey man, Kwalo, when you are from the Free State, how is this Ace Makashuni of yours? And I would laugh at him and tell him that I've told you Ace is not a comrade. And I can say it publicly, I've never called Makashuni a comrade, because he's not. And I would say it to him, to say, don't worry about him, his time will come. That is why even today he's in the cold there, where he belongs. So that we can rebuild our movement to be what it is. Because in the ANC, we needed people like Kaya. We did not need clowns who are here to destroy what we do. We needed people who study. That is why Kaya was still studying even now. He kept on reminding me that I must finish my PhD. That is why sometimes I would always remind him whenever he arrives, as one of the friends was saying, I said, no, but you said you are studying. When you stay until this time, go home. I would do so because I always felt that sometimes we need to push him to complete that. And Amachamba he kept on saying, I don't have a PhD as an ass. And he would be moving. He loved his kids. You know, when you are at his house, he'll be sitting, he'll be calling the twins. He'll call one and say, bring this glass. If he brings it, no, I said a whiskey glass. Not this one. You see, this one is for cognac. Then I said, but Kaya, why? You said, no, I must teach them. They know all these glasses. Then he will tell them how to apply a meat. When he cooks, he like, when he's home, the wife will tell you, he liked cooking himself. To him, it was not his wife's responsibility to cook when he's home. He would cook lunch and make sure that everybody is happy in the house. That was kind. You know that men, when they arrive in their houses, they just go, they sit in the sofa, somebody else must do the work. He liked to work with his hands. He was building his house, working with the people who are building himself. He was not standing folding, even with me. That's the kind I know. But as I said in conclusion, he was very principled, dedicated to the struggle for transformation, hoping that one day this dream of a non-racial, non-sexist and democratic South Africa, where all our people live in peace and harmony, would be realized. I thank you.
Now that someone in that corner was an initiator, can we please have a round of applause? I firmly believe in positive energy. So applause always assists. I'm aware of the decorum, but at the same time, we're now reaching the part where we are celebrating. The points that RC touched here, for the first time I came here only to realize I left because of the potency of what he has just said. Now, another person who is not sharing as much as he should is the Chief of Staff. The Chief of Staff here, I understand his problem a little while ago, when you must talk about a comrade that you know comprehensively, and you wish your audience would get to know who this person is. By the way, Chief of Staff, you spoke for 12 minutes, but you didn't share that wisdom with the RC, but what a beautiful tribute that we got. What a beautiful tribute. Thank you, sir. Please don't laugh too much, you're gonna get me in trouble. I was trying to whisper that. At this point, can we please ask the DCS choir, maybe just a verse or two, so that, because at this point we're now going to bring up the Acting National Commissioner, Mr. Tubahale, to come and address us. Thank you.
Program Director, Minister of the Department of Justice and Correctional Services, Minister Ronald Lamula in absentia, Deputy Minister of Correctional Services, Inkosi Patriot Olomisa in absentia, our mother, Mrs. Nomhla Olomisa. Let me pass my words of gratitude, but also just mention to our mother, Ms. Nomhla Olomisa, that having you with us today reminds us of the battles that we, as the management of the Department of Correctional Services, are led through in the professional work that we do by the Honorable Deputy Minister. The battles that we have been led through with the participation and insight of Comrade Kai. Program Director, let me also just start by not putting through a disclaimer or being apologetic about the fact that in referring to Comrade Kaya, I will refer to him as Comrade Kaya. And also indicate that those who will have an issue with them should note the fact that the basic definition of comrade is a friend, a dear friend to that effect. And my experience of Comrade Kaya in the very few months that I have worked with him in the Department of Correctional Services made me a friend through him in a very few minutes. And that's how I think all of us can confirm his impact in our lives. It wouldn't take you more than those few minutes to confirm that Comrade Kaya is a person that you can live with, you can work with, you can confide in, you can actually rely on in fighting the battles that I have just spoken to. On the same breath, let me recognize the presence of the Chief of Staff, Mr. Bruce Sarela, and other comrades in the ministry that are here today. Let me recognize the presence of the Acting Chief Operations Commissioner, Mr. Pico Mbambo, the Regional Commissioner who's hosting us, Mr. Delegate Class, the area commissioners that are here, the traditional leadership in the House, and also pass a word of gratitude for the opportunity to be in your presence. The ANC leadership that is in the House also pass a word of gratitude for being in your presence. I am also recognizing the presence of fellow employees from the Department of Correctional Services. Most importantly, members of the Somgqeza family who are here, and closely the wife and the children of our brother and comrade. It is befitting for me to start with the comforting words from the Bible. Romans chapter 14 verse 8 reads as thus: "For if we live to the Lord, and if we die to the Lord. So then, whether we live or whether we die, we are the Lord's." In my normal everyday work at the Department of Correctional Services, I'm also responsible for spiritual care. The chaplain did a very good job. I am not going to take his job. I am going to thank him for that. But also let me thank the Chief of Staff and the Regional Commissioner for coming here, standing here to represent the department and providing a befitting tribute and eulogy of the life of Comrade Kaya. So I am standing also to confirm that the Regional Commissioner class was doing that in that context. Now that is the second weight of not being apologetic that I'm going to mention today. Why? Because the history of our country is written in blood and sweat. The history of our country is factual. And Comrade Kaya is an epitome of that. He's a mirror of where we come from. And he's also a mirror of where we are going to. Those who interacted with him in the past months or years of his life benefited from a reflection of where we are going to as a country. And he always reminded us of where we come from. Because he was an active participant and a writer of that history, and he made the point that that history never dies. He was a living organism that on a daily basis communicated that history. That's the context within which I want to confirm. It is with great sadness and a sense of loss and emptiness that I have to stand here myself also and pay tribute. I am not going to get into the detail. The detail was taken care of professionally with great care by the colleagues that came before me. When I was informed of the horrific tragedy which claimed the life of Comrade Kaya, I must say that I was stupefied. I just could not come into terms with it. And I kept on asking the question, what really happened? A distinguished gentleman, and most definitely at the prime of his life, it is said that he had to depart to live during these continuous trying times that he was taking us through with energy and firmness. Let me thank the Office of the Deputy Minister for introducing us to Comrade Kaya, for introducing Comrade Kaya to the DCS family. When one reads a tribute by his former colleague, MASOTSHA MONGEZI from the South African Embassy in New York, I then realized that death has dealt us a serious and deep blow. Comrade Mnguni describes Comrade Kaya as a man of many abilities. A soldier, an activist, a freedom fighter, diplomat, intellectual, teacher, a ballroom dancer, a singer, a poet, a writer, a family man, and above all, a very fine human being, radiating Ubuntu. It is based on this reflection that one feels that we have truly been robbed of a beautiful life. It has been taken from us prematurely. We in the DCS family have experienced him as a brave, hardworking, and committed public servant who opted to devote his life in the service of the people of this country. This man conducted his work so persistently and will thank us as his colleagues. We have indeed been robbed of a true caring servant of the people. To the Somgqeza family, the family of Comrade Kaya, I would like to assure you that you are not alone in this struggle. We share your loss, we feel your pain. Comrade Kaya has left an indelible footprint, an indelible mark in the future of the Department of Correctional Services. Our sincere condolences go to the family, colleagues and friends. Undoubtedly, Comrade Kaya will be dearly missed by all of us who had an opportunity to share moments with him. Program Director, as brief as that, I thank you for the opportunity.
I note that there is someone who has assumed the leadership position of starting the clapping. Thank you. I just want to tell you, it is actually a spontaneous thing to validate and affirm the speaker. Thank you, Acting National Commissioner. Thank you for those wise words and counsel as we move on with our program. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to call upon Omele Umbutompu, the African National Congress. In the context of what we have heard in the last three speakers and beyond, this indeed was a revolutionary. So it's only proper now that we listen to a representative that represents the liberation of our country. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to listen to the member of the Provincial Executive Committee of the ANC in the Western Cape. Over to you, member.
Mandibulise Party Teko isho ndithi inhle lenkonzo kodwa ishoda ngalalo kakhulu tukhanya ingathi isidima sisibambi sihleli ezitulweni kodwa ke nje usumshilo was celebrating a life of a giant.
Viva!
Viva the African National Congress, viva!
Viva!
Ila ngona phakade moya kaComrade ukhaya phila ngona phakade. Ila ngona phakade moya kaComrade ukhaya phila ngona phakade. Let me once again greet, and perhaps I'm gonna follow the leadership of the host and just say all protocol observed. Today we meet here on this very unfortunate day as we relive a life of inkokheli, iqabane, isotsha, uvuka ibambe ongasekhoyo phakathi kwethu. We've been given the responsibility, why we've been asked to come and represent the Interim Provincial Committee of the African National Congress in the Western Cape, to come and share a few words with yourselves. But before I start, mandibale ukubona amanyange nditsho ndithi tutwini mzi wakwaMadiba akuhlanga lungihlanga utshaba lokugqibela oluya kutshatalaliswa kukufa. Siyazi le mini yimini nani ebeningayilindelanga, ebeningayicingelanga, ebenisahleli nijongile into oComrade ukhaya usezabhanani nine-plans kunye naye. Ndiyazibulisela kumzalikazi okhoyo phakathi kwethu, unkosikazi, abantwana, ifemeli yonke yakakhaya. Ndithi bhotani ngale njikalanga. Comrades and friends, and everybody that is here today, I come here with a message from the African National Congress about somebody who has dedicated his life to the cause of the South African people. Comrade Kaya made a choice amongst choices that he could have made to lay his life and ensures that the current democracy that we're all sitting here and experiencing, he made a deliberate input and investment into it. At most here, xa sidilene ngamaxesha anje, sidibana ngexesha lobuhlungu. Siyazi uComrade ukhaya ungamanye amaqabane amane esishiya. Recently, I think also ukusishiya kwakhe coincided nokusishiya kukaQabane uJolidi obeyimeya yaseJohannesburg. Nabanye abaninzi abasishiyeyo. And lento it poses a serious question to us as the African National Congress to be losing, amongst others, the gems of our movement. Some of the philosophers, when they speak about death, one of the things they say that dying is not an event, it is a phenomenon to be understood existentially. Actually, one writer says, death is an anticipated possibility at every moment of life. I think sonke sihleli sisazi intoba ehambeni yethu apha emhlabeni ikhona imini esingayaziyo esizawuthi sidibane nokufa kwethu. It is further said that death is a biological significance of an irreversible termination of all the biological being of a human being. Interestingly today, and we all understand, in the African context, one of the things that we are taught and we appreciate is the significance yokufa ezimpilweni zethu. Amongst others, Africans would yes mourn a loss of a loved one, but because they understood that ukufa is not an event, and therefore that becomes a passage for him or her to move to another world where thina simazi esuka abelidluzi elihle kuthi ngaphaya. These are important perspectives as we speak today about trying to understand this phenomenon of death of people and comrades of the caliber of Comrade Kai. One of the Islamic prophets currently living in the United States, Farrakhan, he writes one time in the turmoil, speaking with some in his congregation. He quotes Isaiah, I think it's verse 1, where he says, "Come, let us reason together." He says this notion of reasoning together as human beings is one of the things that distinguishes us and animals. That we've got the ability to reason when there is a discord in life. And indeed, death brings such a discord in our lives. And that discord is one thing that brings us, all of us here together, so that we can speak about the life of Comrade Kai. But even in his life, we can draw in inspiration of how to be charged forward. Njengoba sisitsho emzabalazini, sithi siyaphakamisa umkhonto walowo uwileyo, sihlabe silinze phambili. The comrades that have spoken here today, and I'm not going to go into the detail, because I think, Comrade Regional Commissioner, you've done well and justice in providing the history of struggle of Comrade Kai. But interestingly for me, as Comrade Kai is what we call the 1985 detachment, as you have said. Interesting for me is to understand what is the significance of this generation. And I think, as you alluded, this is a generation which its mission was already defined, and a generation that did not need any academic papers, a generation that did not need any scientific evidence to actually understand its own mission. But because this is a generation that takes from the 1976, as we've already said, and it continued that particular responsibility of the 1976 generation that was calling for the end of apartheid using the Bantu education of the time. It is significant, of course, as it was explained, that this is the generation of Madiba, a generation that actually responded to the call of the then President Oliver Regional Tambo of making South Africa ungovernable and apartheid unworkable. And interestingly, if we understand, as our theory of the movement teaches us, that we are products of our material realities, that those who were in classrooms at the time had a responsibility when the system at the time decided and thought they had killed, because at the time they had banned all the liberation movements. And therefore, they thought and made the assumption that indeed they killed the spirit of struggle in South Africa. So the 1985 generation is significant because it is one of those generations that at the time demonstrated to the apartheid system at the time that here we are and we shall continue the struggle. Indeed, theirs, and I think I see some of the comrades here, Comrade Colombus Somgqeza, and amongst others, I'm sure here in the Western Cape, would remember the period that we also joined in our own classrooms, recruited to join what was then student representative councils, a call against the prefect system. And that on its own, it helps to conscientize us as a generation of the time. And we were some of those who were taught in classroom the Congress politics. And during that time, we were made to understand that as students, idabi lethu aliqali liphele esikolweni, which is why you will find all of those that were part of the student movement of the time would also be found in the youth movement. The PAYCOs of the time, or the Youth Congress, the KCO in this side, the Cape Youth Congress, which became the South African Youth Congress, and therefore transitioned into the ANC Youth League when it came back into the country after the unbanning. This is the generation of Comrade Tukai. A story important to understand about these features and these characteristics in this generation. Comrade Kaya's personality has been spoken about here. A humongous personality, a diplomat, a parliamentarian, a public servant, a poet, a well-dresser. I also remember him as somebody whom, during our time in the National Youth Commission, we used to interact around youth development issues. That indeed he was someone who was very clear in terms of his theoretical understanding. Comrade Kaya represented this particular generation, a generation of excellence. Because when we speak today and we are able to make the comparison about the ANC that we are from the ANC that we were, is exactly because of these qualities and characteristics. Because the African National Congress of the time, if we remember, from the Anthony Letters of the time, from the Charlotte Macarius of the time, from the Lillian Boys of the time, right up to the Nelson Mandelas, the Tatu Sulu, excellence, both in as far as your academic progression is concerned, but also in how you carry yourself as a member of the African National Congress, was amongst the things that ought to be instilled in those who are then associated with the African National Congress. So it is not a coincidence that we speak about Comrade Kaya today, whom indeed, in his discipline and acceptance of the responsibility as a member of the African National Congress, was able to live these qualities of the leaders of the ANC as we know them. And it is in this character or these characteristics that when we speak of cadres like Comrade Kaya, we speak of people that understood the difference between a member and a cadre. The African National Congress that we speak about today, an organization that has lived more than 100 years. It's an organization that will have opened itself to ordinary members in society, like me and you. But these ordinary members of society will then be placed in the well of knowledge, be trained in the African National Congress, both in theory and in practice, so that in them a cadre is built. Because this concept of a cadre, which is what Comrade Kaya was, no longer a member of the African National Congress, because there's a difference between the two. This cadre is someone who is up to the task of the African National Congress. And such a task that we speak about is the task that we all hear people talking about of a national democratic revolution. What is that? It is a transformation of a society that has been ravaged through colonialism, through apartheid, to a society that is divided, a society that is fighting with itself, to a society that through the African National Congress speaks about a non-racial, a non-sexist, prosperous, democratic and united society. And that particular task is no task of a member, because it requires out of a person something more than an ordinary. It requires clarity of thought. It requires those that understand in themselves the discipline required to carry this particular task. It is important to raise these issues here today because I think the understanding that we have, or what we've been told about Comrade Kaya's personality, must be understood in concert with the values of the African National Congress. And indeed, death is an anticipated possibility. Because as we sit today, we may not have known that uComrade Kaya uzabe emkile namhlanje xa sinikile ndawo. But I think amongst all of us, we knew that one day, or one or the other, sizawuhamba apha emhlabeni. That's why what is important when we speak about the impact of death is what happens between our personhood and the value of life that we live. And I think the most important thing in what we learn from the cadre of the caliber of Comrade Kaya is how he managed to transition or to connect this balance between his own personhood, as we hear Kaya as a son to his family, Kaya as a husband to his wife, Kaya as a father, but also Kaya as a member of the society. And Kaya as a member not only of just a ordinary society, but a society that longs for its freedom. And therefore, Kaya didn't sit and fold his arms when the call for him to join this particular society that he's a member of, to give himself in contributing his life to the freedom that was yearned for by himself, but for the society itself. Because he understood that the resolution of the issues mentioned here by Comrade Class, of what happened to many other colleagues in PEABI, that the resolution of those problems, young as he was, he understood that their answer lies in the resolution of the problems of society, of the South African society itself. And because of that is why he made a clear choice. And this is an interesting thing to speak about today as we are here. That yes, choice is easy to make. And such a choice to join an organization or gas like the African National Congress. But it is then something else, and even more a responsibility, to understand and embrace what the African National Congress is and stands for. And I think ukengoma ebidla ngokulwa ethi ayabizwa amaqhawe azelakho igama lizafumaneka na. Comrade Kaya was one of those whom xa ebizwa amagama amaqhawe, as it was already done here, that igama lakhe shall be named amongst those. Because he understood the concept of the revolutionary in himself. And when he was given moments of training, moments of subjecting himself to the kind of training, the kind of understanding of the African National Congress, as we have been told here, uKaya until the last minute was able to present his own humility and accept to be taught, so that apha kuye ubuyena uMadiba is taken out for the cause of the people. And these are some of the characteristics that are important today when we remember a cadre efana Mkabana, Mhlakaphambi, or program director of this memorial service. When one speaks about cadres of this nature, in a time as this, I am reminded in the story of the Bible of Mordecai and Esther. And I'm not going to go into that story. But what always attracts me to the story is exactly at the time of the challenge, the crisis, Mordecai was able to send someone to Esther, who had happened to be a queen at the time. And Esther was just an ordinary person, if you look at her life, who was an orphan and was taken care of by her uncle Mordecai. But circumstances placed Esther at a very strategic position at a certain time. And when that happened, it happened and there was a situation wherein his own people, the Jews, were under threat. And I'm raising and relating the story to the reality of the times that we live in, as everyone speaks about what is it that is happening in the African National Congress today. The most important thing or interesting thing that Mordecai sent to Esther, when Esther was afraid to actually go to talk to the king, to intervene in killing her own people, the Jews. He reminded her and said, even in this turmoil, it may happen that the salvation of the Jews may not come from you, only come from outside. But you must remember, it may happen that you may have been called for a time as this. This is very important if we consider the time that we're in today. A time where when we look at our country, things are not what we would have envisaged. When we looked at the African National Congress, as it has already been said, that Comrade was worried about the situation of the African National Congress, even here in the Western Cape, whilst he was being reminded to go back home to PE, to actually go and help there. His spirit understood the concept of a time as this. And therefore, as we speak here today, I think the question comes back to what is this characteristic or character of this particular generation of Zaimam, a man who understood, and the generation that I believe is very unique, because it's a generation that was able to see the end of apartheid, but also it's a generation that was actually given an opportunity to live and see the putting together of democracy. And therefore, this actually speaks to the responsibility and the role that has been spoken about here of Comrade. Such a role of being part of transforming an apartheid state, a state that was meant to divide people, a state that was designed including its public service and administration, including how its budgetary systems are designed, were meant to divide people, were meant to deliver to some and not deliver to others, or to deliver quality service and products to some and give inferior service to others. This is the state that Comrade Ekaya was aware and actually contributed in the transformation of the state. Because while the African National Congress participates in elections or participates in what we term contest of the state, it is not for its own sake because there happens to be party democracy in South Africa. It is because the African National Congress, through its time, has understood the importance of utilizing the influence and the levers of the state to change the situation and ensure the kind of society that it desires. And therefore, when we speak about the responsibility, and I see all the colleagues that were working in the current Department of Correctional Services with a Comrade, it is important to understand, and I think also the Acting National Commissioner has said, that there comes a time in society that you can't be apologetic about the responsibility that you are given at a particular point. And that's why there is nothing wrong to stand here being civil servants to date of a democratic state. Because you are not just civil servants. You are civil servants of a democratic state and a state that emanates from a particular past. And therefore, your behavior, your outlook, your presentation must actually demonstrate a departure from the old to the new. And this is the work that Comrade was contributing to. As we were told how he worked with in the international relations to try and ensure that South Africa, that used to be excluded, if we remember the times, from the international platforms, Comrade Kaya was able to contribute through his work as a diplomat. We are hearing, I think, the work he was doing here in Africa and also in other countries of the world, where he ensured that he presents the new democratic South African state for relationships with South Africa for the benefit of its people. This is what we understand those that are part and parcel of the state from the gallows of the revolutionary movement should do. And therefore it is important to understand this as the task of a generation of this time. That it is important to take from the sphere of Comrade Kai that in us, and I'm going straight now to those who are part and parcel of the family of the African National Congress, that we have to dig deeper in ourselves and dig deeper to find in ourselves a candor worthy of the stature of being called a comrade. If we understand, as the acting National Commissioner said, that a comrade is a dear friend, and that only phone tells you about a particular value system that the African National Congress is about. Which is why the foreign tendencies we see in the African National Congress today, where people will fight to a point of killing each other because of position, is foreign, is un-ANC. It is the behavior of those that are members, not those that are cadres. Because the responsibility of what an ANC member requires in us is a transition from being a member to a cadre. Comrade Kaya walked that particular route. We had all the speakers here speaking about the cadre in him. No longer a simple-minded person that we're talking about here. We're talking about a leader of a high caliber, of high stamina, as once spoken about in the early 40s by Anthony Madiba. That this is the kind of people that we need to drive the kind of revolution required for the delivery of the people of South Africa. And therefore, as I conclude, Program Director, for me, I think the lesson we take from the kind of a person and the road traversed and the revolutionary history we listen from the work of Comrade Kai is most importantly to understand the lessons behind it. What is it that is teaching us as we remain behind? Because indeed, death is an anticipated possibility. And even as we sit here, we cannot guarantee any of us that we shall not die. But what is important is that as we know such a possibility, what kind of a life we leave behind. We are told how Comrade Kaya lived his life, and his family shall enjoy, even in the pain, they shall remember him. They shall remember the good men that they were able to share with South Africa in the world. And these are some of the lessons that actually the rights of Isaiah speaks about when they say, come now, let us reason together. What is it that is missing to us as this generation? As the African National Congress tries to renew itself and speaks about renewal, rebuilding, and unity of the ANC, an ANC that Comrade Kai loved and lived for. It is important, therefore, we can phambi one session ukutsho ukuthi amakhawe afana noComrade Kai ayingobantu awabafumana bebaninzi in society. That is why it becomes painful when we lose them at a time as this. Because eli xesha alilo xesha le-expedience, lixesha labantu abakwazi ukuzikisa uqina, lixesha leengqondi zesizwe zikwazi ukudibanisa imihlambi eyalanayo, zikwazi ukuthethathethana nabantu nemimoya to ensure that asilahleki kule ndlela abantu abafana noComrade Khaya abaye babeka ubomi babo ukwenzela into yoba namhlanje siphile kule South Africa sikuyo. Kubalulekile ke ngoko from those who were working with him in the department, if indeed we are here in this memorial service to honor Comrade Khaya, his memory shall not be an event. His memory must live in us, trying to emulate the kind of a comrade, the kind of a leader Comrade Khaya was. A comrade of excellence, a comrade that writes, something that is missing in African National Congress today. Comrades go into a meeting, they speak from their heads, they interpret situations based on their emotions, they don't go to the depth of why. Comrade Khaya is part of a generation that was taught to ask why until you die. So that you don't look at problems at face value, but also you document what you see. That's why today, sinabantu abakwazi ukurefera kodwa kusisulu nezinto bezali kodwa uMandela they wrote when they were in prison. That quality of writing has evaded us as this current crop in the ANC. Umuntu akakwazi ukubhala kwakunye nemizuzu le ehlanganiso. In the African National Congress, and I'm sure those who know Comrade Khaya and who know the generation that he comes from, in the ANC there's even a style of writing. How you write documents, the ANC, how resolutions are written in conference. That is why when you read conference by conference resolution of the ANC, you shall be able to see the style of writing in the ANC. But to date, that is something that we do not have. And how do we comment? Plus, I think the question of those like yourself will remain who understand this value system have got a bigger responsibility. And such a responsibility is to ensure that so long, comrades, we believe that the African National Congress shall be led by single-minded men and women. Comrade Khaya calls them. Ladies and gentlemen, this is when the ANC is going to be going backwards, running very fast, but running backwards. Because the ANC is an organization of giants. So in all of those who join the African National Congress, one of the things that we must strive for daily is to unleash and unlock the giant in them. Because in the absence of that, the task of the African National Congress is just too big. And therefore, I think it is important to celebrate this particular life and dedicate ourselves to the kind of attributes that Comrade Khaya was. And commit ourselves, all of us that are here, that indeed we shall endeavor, learning from Comrade Khaya, to live and lead like such comrades. And indeed, if we perish, we perish. Thank you very much.
Exactly. The second round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for a powerful tribute to Comrade Khaya. Thank you very much, man. We are coming closer to where we should be, and would like to move with haste, having had all those remarkable comments. I will take this offsite with our host regional commissioner, but it is to observe that as the PC member came through, she was the first woman to come and stand here and render an item. Of course, we had Pastor Semi's daughter also on the platform, just on a smaller note, but significant all the same. Secondly, just to say this before we start our next item, the former Chief of Staff, former ACCP General Secretary, the legendary Chris Hani, except the newbies, Everybody who's matured and an adult remembers exactly where they were when those news came through. Because of the potency and the impact that it had throughout the nation. I am therefore saying, which I did say at the Somgqeza family place, that on the balance of probabilities, everybody who's here in the room has a distinct remembrance of where they were when this news came through. It's because the brutal giant had fallen. That takes me us to our next item, where we shall now be playing audio-visual with respect and courtesy of the family. Over to you, please. Thank you very much. The Bible that says we do not know the day or the hour, it will come like a thief in the night. We also do say that the Alpha and the Omega, who was there in the beginning, is here today, will be there forever, is in charge of all our destinies, ladies and gentlemen. That's in the interest of time. I'm just going to, now that we did not have a speaker from Parliament, I'm just going to read 2 paragraphs or so from a dear colleague from Parliament. Mr. Somgqeza was my mentor as head of international relations in Parliament as I was policy research analyst reporting to him. I am where I am because of his guidance on issues of diplomacy and international relations in general. We together developed the strategy of Parliament in 2012, which presented and was approved by former Speaker Mongs. This has empowered me with an immense skill that enabled me to coordinate the process of reviewing Parliament's policy perspectives and operational guidelines in international relations, which was presented and approved by Parliament, joint rules and Speaker Kandimodisa in 2021. I have walked many paths with Madiba from the moment he met me in 2011 in Parliament. He later found that I'm from the same family with Gandhi, who knew my cousin, who was his personal friend. From the moment he became my personal and family friend, he knew my parents and his children and mine are friends, including Sis being his wife. It is sad to learn about his demise, and I cannot come to terms with his permanent and untimely departure. I trust that with time I will learn to understand that which I cannot change. At this point, we'd like to invite Reverend Kiva to please come through and give us a message, just a very brief message. It is not a sermon, just a brief message, so that we can redefine the landscape, because we're now talking about a man's spirit. Reverend Kiva is in the room. If you could please come through, sir, so that we can just have the message as well about to conclude today's proceedings. The choir may please sing a song as he please comes up. Sizo Kameles Palin. Amatu Zanabi. Program Director, delegates from the ministry, the acting National Commissioner, the acting COC, the Regional Commissioner, all the area coordinators that are here, the DCS family, ubukhosi bonke obukhoyo apha, the ANC leadership and its delegation, ifamily yakwaSomgqeza kwakunye nefamily yakulomama uSomgqeza. Allow me this afternoon to greet you in the wonderful name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Without wasting time, let me read the word of God. I'm going to read from the book of Luke, chapter 1, and I'm going to read from verse 34, which reads as follows. And Mary said to the angel, "How will this be, since I am a virgin?" And the angel answered her, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore the child to be born will be called Holy, the Son of God. And behold, your relative Elizabeth, in her old age, has also conceived a son, and this is the 6th month with her, who was called barren. For with God nothing shall be impossible." And Mary said, "Behold, I am the servant of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your word." And the angel departed from her. And the Xhosa version reads as follows. Saphendula isithunywa sathi kuye, "Umoya oyingcwele uyakuza phezu kwakho. Athi namandla asenyangweni akusibekele. Kungoko loo nto ingcwele izalwa nguwe iyakubizwa ngokuba ngunyana kaThixo." Uyabona, uElizabethe ozalana naye umithe unyana ebudaleni bakhe, nale inyanga yesithandathu kuye, lowo bekuthiwa ngongazaliyo. Ngokuba akukho nanye into eyakumnqabela yena uThixo. Wathi ke uMaria, "Nanko umkhonzazana wenkosi, makwenzeke kum ngokwelizwi lakho." Saza isithunywa simka kuye. May the Almighty God bless the reading of His word.
now and forever. Amen. In the interest of time, Program Director, let me not go into detail in terms of the background of this chapter, or in terms of the verses that I have read. Fortunately, I had time acting COC, and I spoke to the family a day after Mr. Somgqeza passed on. I am very sure that they can still recall and remember the words I have shared with them. And amongst the things that I said to the Somgqeza family was that Zelingamsoli uThixo. All that you should say, family of Somgqeza, wena Nkosi uyazi. As to why Mr. Somgqeza had to depart from this planet during this time, only God knows. When Nkosi uyazi, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth with a message for Mary, who was promised in marriage to a man called Joseph. The angel told Mary that she would have a son whom she was to name Jesus. The angel came to Mary and said, "Peace be with you. Vuya wena ubabalweyo. The Lord is with you and has greatly blessed you." Waqhipha kumbilini uMary yile ndithethwa sesisithunywa. And the angel, having noticed that Mary was wondering and was terrified by what he was saying, the angel calmed her down and said, "Don't be afraid." Mhlawumbe that is the message ekumele ukubana ngaba masiyithethe kuni lusapho lwakwaSomgqeza. Okubana ngaba ukufa kukaBhukhaya ze kunganothusi. Into esizokuyenza lusapho lwakwaSomgqeza sokomSomgqeza emveni kwelinye nje sizokuthi kuni ukufa kukaBhukhaya ze kunganothusi. Because God has been gracious to you. And the angel said to Mary, "You will become pregnant and give birth to a son, and his name will be Jesus. He will be great, and he will be called the Son of the Most High God." Again, Mary could not understand what the angel was saying. And she asked a question. How is that possible that I give birth to a son, whereas I am a virgin. Yenzeka njani into yokubana ngaba ndizawuzala unyana kodwa andazani nendoda? The angel answered, the Holy Spirit will come on you, and God's power will rest upon you. Mhlawumbe mandiyeke lusapho loMongs Somgqeza kwakunye bonke abantu abakhoyo apha. Ndiye kwingxam okanye kumyalezo endinqwenela ukubana ngaba sithi xa siphuma kweli holo siphume siphethe wona. For with God nothing shall be impossible. Akukho nanye into eyakunqabela yena uThixo. Having listened to all the speakers in this hall, eyona nto lusapho lwakwaSomgqeza esinqwenela ukubana ngaba siyithethe yeyokubana ngaba these two shall pass. Kuba kuYuthixo akukho nanye into enqabeleyo. Ngaleli ntlungu nijongene nayo ngokumka kukatata uSomgqeza iseza kudlula. Kuba uyena wethu uThixo esimkhonza imihla ngemihla akukho nanye into enqabelayo. Indoda eyayisihla ngegathi yadibana nezihange zayigunyula. Bagqitha abantu bagqitha emntwini. Kuzawufika ixesha lusapho lwakwaSomgqeza nithi xa nibajonga abantu nifumanise okokubana ngaba abaninakanga. Vumani ndithi kuni linjalo kakade ihlabathi. Vumani ndithi kuni kunjalo kakade xa ujongene nengxaki uthi izinto okuzibona ngolunye uhlobo xa usengxakini uzibone ngolunye uhlobo. Begqitha abantu kule ndoda ingwelekile idinga uncedo. Kwathi sengaseni kwavela umSamariya olungileyo. Wathi xa ijonga le ndoda wafumanisa okubana ngaba idinga uncedo. Uthi umbhaleli wasekhaya yathatha ioli yayigalela emanxebeni. Uthi umbhaleli wasekhaya yathatha iwayini yayigalela emanxebeni. Vumani emveni komitshe lusapho lwakwaSomgqeza ndithi kuni nelinye inxeba kusezawugalelwa ioli. It might not be today, but one thing that I know, yeyokubana ngaba uzawuvela umSamariya awagalele ioli amanxeba enu. Owethu uThixo akukho nayo into enqabelayo. Even the wounds eninazo usapho lwakwaSomgqeza, owethu uThixo onganangelwa nto useza kwakoba kuba yena unguThixo ongumbophi wamanxeba. Program director ndizawukwehla kodwa ndikhumbule ukubana ngaba ngenye imini uPeter noJohn babebheke etempileni ngentsimbi yesithathu emveni kwemini. And that is the hour that was known as the hour of prayer. But bafika esangweni letempile, bafika kuhleli indoda, le ndoda icela amalizo kubo bonke abantu abangenapha. Bathi xa befika le ndoda yanethemba lokubana ngaba baza kuyinika imali, kodwa manje abawathethayo ngawokubana ngaba igolide nesilivere asinayo, kodwa ngelizwi likaThixo phakama uhambe. Sizokuthi kuye lusapho lwabasomgqeza, igolide nesilivere asinayo. Sizokuthi kuye lusapho lwabasomgqeza, amazwi okubuyisa ubukhaya asinawo, okanye the instruments zokumbuyisa asinazo, kodwa sizokuthi kuye niwilende ngelizwi likaThixo. Phakamani lusapho lwabasomgqeza, kuba wethu uThixo akanqatyelwanga. Akukho nani into enqabelayo yena uThixo. Xa ndizawuyeka program direct, ngumane ndithi lusapho lwabasomgqeza, even you, God is going to relieve you from your latest. Ngomso lusapho lwabasomgqeza, ukufudumala kwelanga nizakhululwa. Ngomso ukufudumala kwelanga nisezawususwa kula mandlalo nihleli kuwo. Ngomso ukufudumala kwelanga ezo nyembezi zisemehlweni enu zisezakosulwa. Ngomso ukufudumala kwelanga vumanini lusapho lwabasomgqeza, ndithi kuye kusezixesha lokubana ngaba kungabisabikho kukhala, kungabisabikho sidlwini, kuba izinto zokuqala zidlule. Akukho nani into emqabelayo uThixo lusapho lwabasomgqeza. uYesu xa efika eBhethani xelela into yobana ngaba uLazaro selensuku 4 ebhubhile. Odade wabo uMary kwakunye noMartha babe imiphefumulo yabo nentliziyo zabo zidandathekile. Ingathi nini lusapho lwabasomgqeza? Ngokumka kukaBhukhaya, intliziyo zenu zidandathekile, intliziyo zenu zisukile esihlalweni. Athi uMartha asawuva okubana ngaba uYesu uyeza, waphuma wayekumkhawulela. Uthi xa edibana naye uthi okubana ngaba ubukho umntakwethu ngeyengafanga, vumani lusapho lwabasomgqeza, ndithi kuni kungenzeka okubana ngaba ngani nithetha la mazwi nitsho okubana ngaba uThixo ebekho, uBhukhaya ngengafanga, kodwa vumani ekuseni nje ndithi kuni ukuhamba kukaBhukhaya. It was the decision of our Lord. UThixo wethu akho nani into emnqabelayo. Zonke izinto ezenzekayo kuye zenzeka at God's appointed time. As we celebrate Mr. Somgqeza's life, we are here to say, you too shall rise from the bed and rule. This is the bed eyenzelwe lusapho lwabasomgqeza. However, nokanje nihlele emandlalweni, nokanje mama uSomgqeza uhlele emandlalweni, kodwa uThixo wethu onganqatyelwa nto useza kuphakamisa kwakunye nefemeli yakho. Xa ndiyeka program direct ndivumele ukubana ngaba ndithi kuni, even if an enemy can rejoice, even if the enemy can rejoice, as much as you are down ngokuna, kodwa ndifumane ndithi kunilisapho lamaSomgqeza, you shall get up again. Ningaba nihleli phansi kaloku nje, ningaba ngoku nihlabanisele ngengqiniba, kodwa vuma ndithi nokuba kunjalo uThixo wethu onguThixo onamandla onke, uThixo wethu onguThixo ozizinto zonke, ongalakelwa nto lusapho lwamaSomgqeza ulihlabanisele ngejolo. Kodwa emveni okuhlatyaniselwa kwenu ngejolo, uThixo wenu useza kuniphakamisa. Vumani ukufa kunicinezele ngejolo, kakade lusapho lwamaSomgqeza. Amandla siwazuza xa sisesacinezelwa phantsi ngejolo. Kulapho kanye uthi amandla kaThixo siwamana khona xa ngaba siwile. Vumani emveni kwemini nje ndithi kuni lusapho lwamaSomgqeza, nokuba nje niwile namhlanje, kodwa ngomso uThixo wethu onganqatyelwa nto useza kuniphakamisa. Ekusweleni kwenamandla lusapho lwamaSomgqeza, uThixo ukuzuzisa amandla uza kuzuzisa amandla. Xa nizawuyobeka uTata Somgqeza, yazini ukubana ngaba nokubana ngaba ngoku ningabonakala ningenamandla, kodwa emveni kwexesha uThixo ukuzuzisa amandla uza kunizuzisa amandla, kuba yena unguThixo onganqatyelwa nto. Mawananyeke la mazwi egemana lawo wafayo wabuya wavuka, onguYesu Kristu Nkosi yethu. Amen.
Amen, 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 amen. I shall pass through this world but once. Any good therefore that I can do, or any kindness that I can show to any human being, let me do it now. Let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. Anonymous. Sifikelela ke kuvutho ndaba, our last item. I also want to keep the peace and say nothing after the last item. This morning, in my office, uMadiba udlula kule yam 2 doors away on my left. That we call it a big corner. There's a void and emptiness. To think the unthinkable about uMadiba is not going to pass this door again. Wabe sekuchiwo apha indoba he was a poet. I was thrilled. Ndiena nantsika nje lemicala ithi xa isihla ispela ukhaya, ithi xa igqibezela ispele uSomgqeza. Each beginning of the line is an alphabet elispela ukhaya Somgqeza. It reads as follows: kingly, well-groomed, a revolutionary, a visionary, adaptable, energetic, engaging, clothed in finery. Yearned for an Africa, a world that promotes peace and justice. An African intellectual who believed in the family of nations. Serenaded presidents, kings and queens in his diplomacy. operated, grew up eBhayilambathwa in his infancy. Madiba the socialite, Madiba the joker, Madiba the showman. Great were his strides, impeccable his political savvy, a mark of a man. Cowardice, dear brother, where to, beloved patriot, in the nation's hour of need. Embraced excellence, frowned on nonchalance, a scholar, a leader indeed. Zest for life, panache and style, a family man, a comrade. All in all, fare thee well, Madiba, fare thee well, the son of the soil. Your legacy will live on. Thank you. At this point, very last item, we are bringing on Pastor Seni and the daughter Raylene. As they perform, there will be the last item so that we can call upon the family representative who will then do our very last item. Over to you. To come and address us at this point. Over program yetu Masibulele kakhulu ulosapho oleke ngaphandle kokuba besibulela nathi kambe kodwa ke basinika nomkhombandlela wokuba usapho lwakwaSomgqeza lidluleleni inkonzo yokugqibela ufaka iswakholile yakube iningi siyabulela kakhulu. And we are sure into yokuba iziphathamandla zesebe ebezikhankanyile ekuqaleni umphathiswa osekela mphathiswa nomkomishana wanational kanjalo sawubazisa ngokwesibhengezo esisifumene. Last item eyokubana I'm under instruction into yokubana ndazise ukuba usapho njengoba ke ngoku uzawuproceedwa out apha eholweni usapho will then go back to the room, the receiving room ebebekuyo phambi kwabeze apha, and we stress the family, that the family will go and return to the room. Otherwise, that said, sibulela kumuntu wonke indeed. And that brings us to the end of this memorial service. Yabulela cooperation as we're celebrating the life of this giant. Enkosi kakhulu. Enkosi.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Trevor.
I'm still online.
Thank you, Trevor. I'm Trevor.
It's not going, Mama.
I'm Trevor. This is Coco. Thank you, Trevor. Thank you,
That's a
Trevor.
pleasure, guys. In fact, let me kill the sound now.